So Rob will be talking about the boring revolution, how AI will change education and the workplace, and how you may not even notice. So very excited, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you. Gray metal, pull-out drawers, hanging folder files. Doesn't beep, doesn't light up, it can't be networked. You can't connect it to the Internet of Things. Does it get any more boring than a filing cabinet? Last year, I left my job at Penn, and I had to go through years and years worth of paper. Pulling out drawers, going through the filing folders, looking for anything that was important enough to send to university archives. There was not much, but it was a mess. An analog mess. Something those of you who have only had to work in the paperless paradise of the digital age will never have to face. Of course, the digital world has its own problems with information overload. Some days, as I stare at my email inbox, or I go through my list of podcasts that I haven't quite gotten to yet, or I open my application that feeds me my news, I kind of miss the days of paper. Yet the promise of this most recent wave of technology, these large AI models built by Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic, is that they will manage this never-ending flow of information. They will free us from our screens. Or maybe not. Maybe thanks to AI, we will drown in information as AI slop spills out all over the World Wide Web. Maybe AI is a threat to our education, to our species. When we think about artificial intelligence, it's nearly always in terms of individuals. Each of us, we get an AI assistant, an AI companion. We ask, what will AI agents do for me or not do for me? When we think about the social impacts of AI, we go to the big questions about the future, about humanity. What if AI makes work go away? What if AI makes us go away? Today, we're going to aim between individual questions and the big social questions. We're going to talk about AI in terms of organizations. How might business enterprises and institutions of higher education adapt and adopt this new technology? I admit, that's kind of boring compared to having an army of AI agents at your command, or stories about fighting killer robots from the future. But if we want to understand what AI is changing, we need to talk more about how these tools are impacting organization. I'm Rob Nelson. I worked for 18 years as a bureaucrat at University of Pennsylvania. My job was implementing digital technology across the institution. I led projects like implementing Canvas as our learning management system, Banner as our information system, and yes, Explorance is blue. Last year, I got excited and deeply interested in about how AI is changing education. So I left my job to write and talk about AI while I continued to teach at Penn. My very first software project was implementing Blue as Penn's course evaluation. So I've known Samer, both Samers, for a long time now, and I admire what Explorance has become since I first started working with them in 2007. The tools this company builds are about extending human potential. They focus on what technology can do for organizations and the people who work for them. I especially like that emphasis on people, on amplifying human voices. That resonates strongly with me, and especially since I've been talking with people about AI, the way AI is changing the way we work and learn. Like Samer said this morning, I asked for early access to BlueX so I could use it to prepare this keynote. I use pre-class surveys in my teaching all the time, but this was the first time I've used a pre-keynote survey. And like with classes, it was really helpful in preparing this talk. So I'm going to show you some of the results in just a minute, but I want to talk about how we perceive AI. So how many people see a duck? How many people see a rabbit? Both hands if you see a duck and a rabbit. All right, good. Now we can do jazz hands because our hands are up. Yeah. All right, so this is how I want us to think about AI. When ChatGPT first hit the headlines 3 years ago, it was all about the duck of doom. Teachers saw a cheating machine that enabled every student to complete their homework or a term paper with a press of a button. It looked like the death of writing, the end times for education as we know it. If you read about AI in education today, you'll read and hear a lot of those same kinds of feelings. But you'll also see plenty of people talking about the rabbit, who say, no, 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 no. This is not doom. This is the rabbit of glad tidings. Don't you see it? AI can do the boring work of lesson plans and email, and maybe even the most dreaded teaching task of all, grading. As for cheating, maybe AI can fix that. Each student will have a personal tutor adapted to their needs and individual learning styles. No more cheating, no more disengagement, just time on task with every student proceeding at their own pace. So that's the picture in education. In business and industry, the rabbits are the early adopters, enthusiasts who see how AI is changing everything, everywhere, all at once. That was the name of Kaylee's presentation this morning. I liked it, I stole it. Coding and marketing tasks, they're going to be done like that. Frontline customer service will be completely automated in a matter of months or maybe a year. The rabbits say we are on our way to Easy Street. But then the ducks say, no, 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 these are not glad tidings. If AI can do all these tasks, then doesn't that mean our jobs are going away? And anyway, have you noticed when you actually use these AI assistants, their outputs look good at first, but a lot of time they're missing something important or they're hallucinating. The demos are very impressive, but AI is not so different from other forms of digital technology. It overpromises and underdelivers. So is it a duck? Is it a rabbit? What do you see? Both, right? All right, with all this emotional swirl and the speed of change, the arguments back and forth, it can be really hard to understand what's happening. We don't have good data on who's using AI and what they're doing with it. Note that I said good data. There are plenty of surveys and papers out there, but the ones that you see covered most in the newspaper, in the press, and on television and in the news are usually being promoted by either the ducks or the rabbits. Everybody looks for data that proves their point, and usually they find it. All right, so one of the challenges about giving talks about AI is you never know where people's heads are at. Sometimes I give talks to faculty, and they're like, what do you mean a rabbit? That's nothing but a duck, man. Or I go to tech conferences, and they come up to me and like, sir, I'm sorry, if you want to talk about the duck, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. So there's some real divergence here. But here's what we found. Again, low response rate. And all I was doing here was using the widget in BlueX and just doing screen captures and putting them in the presentation. So you can see, I'm not going to really speak much to these because the widget does a pretty good job of just presenting the data. So I just pulled a few comments out of the 12 or 14 that we got, just to give you a sense of the range of the answers. in a little bit, I'm going to show you I also couldn't resist. I put it through Millie. And so we'll take a look at what the sentiment analysis is for this. All right, since most of you have had some experience with AI tools, I'm not going to spend much time just talking about the basic uses. We've got a handle on that. What I want to do is talk about what I see on the cutting edge when it comes to AI impacting organizations. And if you're here for Bob's conversation with Samer, you know that for the most part, that's not universities. To be sure, there's a lot of really great cutting edge research happening on university campuses in computer science and STEM fields. In my own discipline, history, there's some really fascinating stuff happening with large language models in combination with high energy scans, looking at ancient texts that we can't touch because they will crumble if we touch them. So there's all kinds of exciting things happening at universities with AI models. But when it comes to management and administration, we'll just say that's not exactly a strength. Innovation in those spaces is not exactly a strength with higher ed. So the most interesting examples I can find of enterprises using AI models are mostly business enterprises, which I think is fine. We want well-resourced enterprises doing this kind of experimentation. They can afford it. It's also worth mentioning before I start talking about these examples that when executives talk about AI, you will only hear success stories. They want to talk about the rabbit. Journalists, on the other hand, love a good, scary headline. Here's one from The Markup, which is one of the best nonprofit newsrooms covering technology. This is a classic Duck of Doom headline. Artificial intelligence, nuclear power. Oh, no. But when you read the article, the duck fades away. You find out that AI is not going to take over the management of Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. Instead, and here I quote, the artificial intelligence tool named Neutron Enterprise is just meant to help workers at the plant navigate extensive technical reports and regulations. Millions of pages of intricate documents from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that go back decades. While the workers operate and maintain the facility. So, I don't fault the markup for this headline. They need to get people's attention, and the combination of nuclear fission and AI really grabs you by the eyeballs. But the story itself is not exactly one for the rabbits. What AI is doing here is kind of boring, but very useful to an organization operating in a highly regulated sector of the economy. So, the state of California recently extended the plant's approval to operate through 2029. So that means the workers there are facing hundreds of decisions to replace or extend their safety equipment, looking at depreciation schedules and updating procedure manuals. The 2 or 3 filing cabinets I had to go through last year is a drop in their ocean. Millions of pages of documents going back decades. That problem seems kind of boring from the outside, but if Neutron Enterprise can perform this narrow function well, then wow. And look, this is a very narrow use of AI. It's not deciding anything. All it's doing is finding the relevant regulations and guidance for each decision the workers have to make, so the workers themselves can interpret those rules as they make the decision. When those workers look at Neutron Enterprise, they see a rabbit. That's the boring revolution in a nutshell. Exciting and scary headlines, but underneath what's happening is that this is turning into this. And as cute as this graphic is, and as revolutionary as a talking filing cabinet can be, that's not how large AI models are being marketed. I find it helpful to remember the hype about self-driving cars. In 2009, when Google put the first prototypes for autonomous vehicles on the roads in San Francisco, there were all these confident predictions. Convoys of self-driving trucks were going to be roaring across interstates. Uber and Lyft were going to fire all their human drivers and run their services as networks of autonomous vehicles. And that's happening at a much slower pace than the people who run the companies and make autonomous vehicles were hoping or predicting. Some of those same executives have been making claims about how quickly AI models will replace human workers. And look, AI is very impressive, but the issues involved are quite complicated. It's hard to make sense of all this complexity. Fortunately, we have a purpose-built technology for helping people understand a complicated topic. You may have heard of it. It's called books. I recommend this one. It's AI Snake Oil by a couple of computer scientists at Princeton University, Arvind Narayanan and Sayesh Kapoor. They're computer scientists, so they understand the technology really well. But they also write about and think very carefully about the social impacts of AI. One of their latest papers is called AI as a Normal Technology. And they mean normal a lot like I mean boring. The bottom line for them and for me is that while hype may help sell AI, it will not help us understand how to use it effectively. To understand AI, we have to do more than just think about what it is. We have to think about how people use it. So don't worry about the details here on this figure, but pay attention to the colors. The blue section is all about the invention of large AI models. This is where most of our focus has been for the last couple of years. The builders of AI models want to compare the models. They're focused on having the best one because they're in a competitive marketplace. They need the hype. They want to have the edge while they watch the competition, and all of them are trying to figure out what these things are actually good for and how much they can charge to use them. The people competing to build these models only see the rabbit, which makes it really hard for them to understand why people using the tools are not always as enthusiastic as they are. The explanation for this is in the pink area, and especially in the peach-colored area. When products and applications get tested and released, that's when things get real. Sometimes putting a product out in the world results in a positive surprise for the company. When ChatGPT was released, OpenAI was shocked at how popular it became. But the opposite happens too. Think about all those duck headlines. When chat models get rushed out into release, sometimes they immediately surface really outrageous examples of algorithmic bias or just plain weird behavior. Or think about the humane pin, the little device that was going to hook on your chest and record and listen to every single thing you said. Just because someone likes chatting with an AI model does not mean they want one to answer their kids' questions or decide who to hire or track everything they say. The most recent capabilities, what the marketing people call agentic AI, is just starting to move from the blue area into the complex loop of innovation and diffusion. We've been hearing a lot of hype about this, and I expect to start hearing some stories and reading some headlines about things not exactly going according to plan. So here's an important point. As diffusion happens to inventions, things slow down. Innovation hits speed limits, especially as it bumps up against laws. Think about all the copyright litigation that remains unresolved with these large AI models. Think about some of the laws that are being proposed to limit what tools kids can access. All this also gets changed by the norms that govern human behavior. Norms change, but we really don't know yet how they're going to change due to AI. A year from now, how much will we trust an AI model? And what exactly will we trust it to do? We just don't know the answers to those questions yet. More and more, the loop between innovation and diffusion will be where generative AI succeeds and fails. Diffusion does not happen at the speed developers and investors want. The process of adoption and adaptation and the innovation necessary for success happens at the speed of humans and organizations, not machines and capital markets. The humans who hesitate, ask questions, come up with reasons to be cautious, or see a better way of using a tool, they add time to the process and value. Yesterday, Samara shared Martik's Law, which describes the relationship between how fast technology changes and how slowly organizations change. As someone who has worked on a lot of technology implementations, I want to share my favorite version of this idea, which is also a law. It always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. Yep. Why is that? Because the process of innovation and diffusion does not happen in a vacuum. Humans have long-standing habits, beliefs, and problems. Every new technology meets humans where they are, not where the technology enthusiasts want them to be. And social contexts matter a lot to how individuals and organizations use new technology. So let's talk about the social contexts that matter for these new generative forms of AI. My favorite poet is Shel Silverstein, always has been, always will be. This is Jimmy Jett and his TV set from Where the Sidewalk Ends. It was written in 1981 when social critics were really worried about television thanks to this exciting and scary new invention called cable TV. Information on screens was suddenly available in great quantity, 24/7. And in the words of Neil Postman, a social critic, we were all in danger of amusing ourselves to death. He watched all day, he watched all night, till he grew pale and lean, from the early show to the late, late show and all the shows between. He watched till his eyes were frozen wide and his bottom grew in his chair, and his chin turned into a tuning dial, and antenna grew out of his hair. The demands of the attention economy have only gotten worse thanks to the digital age. Like little Jimmy Jett, we are turning ourselves into entertainment for each other. The only difference is that little Jimmy Jett is wireless now. He only needs to plug in maybe once a day to charge. These worries about screens have shaped how we think about generative AI models. Will AI make our screen addictions worse, or will they provide tools to change the information ecosystem for the better? A little of both, maybe? Anyone recognize this image? HAL, right, from 2001, A Space Odyssey. So one of the ways that AI can make things worse, a lot worse, is by increasing the surveillance and control capabilities of businesses, schools, and governments. The worst uses of AI I can think of involve accumulating data about how fast employees or students can accomplish tasks and using those data to extract value from customers or to shape the educational experience of students. And it's not just workers and students. Companies use data to give customers what they want without giving them time to think about what they need. One response to AI used by students is to develop tools that monitor their work constantly. This is not a world I want to teach in. When it comes to industry, Amazon is the example of how extreme this can get. If you don't know these stories, search for Amazon driver surveillance or Amazon customer surveillance. If you really want to get freaked out, add the word creepy to those searches. All right, that's plenty of duck of doom. Now I want to talk about a company that uses AI responsibly and in ways that benefit workers and management, as well as students and teachers. So many years ago, when Millie was just a gleam in Explorance's eye, Samara and I talked about the risks of using what we called machine learning on student evaluation comments. You're all Explorance customers, so it's not a surprise for me to tell you that Samara anticipated my concerns and questions. I'm here on stage today because of that conversation and the many like it over the years. It's about the trust I have in Explorance. And one of my concerns about the companies that are developing these large AI models is they don't seem to get how important trust is. To name a name here, there just isn't that much that's open about OpenAI. On my blog, I advocate for greater consideration of trustworthiness when we're evaluating technology for the workplace and for education. I've had enough bad experiences and heard too many horror stories to be satisfied with what a company, especially a startup, tells me about privacy and their sense of responsibility. I don't want to just see the words. I want to see evidence. Until there's a long track record, it should be trust but verify. And if you won't let me verify your data security, then no thank you. The sample size I got here wasn't large enough to do anything really interesting with Millie, but I used the employee experience model for a rough sentiment analysis. So what I knew going into it from the sample size is that this crowd leans rabbit. I think that's good. I'm starting to lean more rabbit myself. All right, I want to get back to the boring revolution. My second example of how organizations are using AI is Reuters, the news gathering and distribution company. Now, Reuters, which by the way is owned by Thomson Reuters, which is headquartered in Toronto, Reuters has a history that goes back even further than the filing cabinet. In the 1850s, Paul Reuter figured out that people who make their living in financial markets are willing to pay a lot to get accurate information delivered quickly. Reuters solved this problem during the information revolution that was sparked by the telegraph. He developed a news service that delivered market news from the London Stock Exchange around the world. In the 174 years since, Reuters has adapted and adopted new information technology quickly and effectively, keeping ahead of the competition. Today, it's doing the same with AI. This interview with Paul Bascobert, the president of Reuters, will give you a window into how the operation of a newsroom spread across the globe is being transformed by the incorporation of large language models and other types of AI. As you're going to hear, this is far more than about chatbots and writing support.
When you think about the products you want to build, it sounds like AI is a big part of them. Are you thinking that some of these models and companies will help you make better products? Do you think the models are all kind of the same in the context of what you're trying to build?
Oh, I think we're finding them to be very different in terms of what they do. They're a part of how we deliver our products. So our solutions are a mixture of large language models, some very specialized tools. We have some of our own small language models that we've built for very specific purposes. And so what we're finding is that the right answer is a series of tools orchestrated well to get to the level of quality that we want to have. So it's both.
Well, and you've lightly described what it is you want to build, right? A new way of accessing the information your journalists create. Is that a chatbot to you? Is that a voice assistant? What is that?
That's just one piece on the professional consumer side of it. The bigger part of what we're doing is actually we've been investing in our newsroom operation for the last year and a half. Alessandra Galloni, our editor-in-chief, has been, I think, an incredibly inspiring leader. And she has a vision of the newsroom of the future being an AI-powered newsroom. So we have built tools that access every piece of moving news around the world, and using a combination of language models, we can access this data in multiple languages, grab it, pull it in, look at it, validate it with a human, and push it out. Anything from a government press release to NVIDIA's earnings. You can think about all of the importance of speed and accuracy in that. We've taken that from 85 down to 33 seconds. It's an enormous amount of time. And so that tool is running, 600 people are using that, 1 million alerts so far this year, 6-7 languages. In our core newsroom, we've got a headline generating tool, we've got a bullet point generating tool, summary tools, we've got error checking tools, but these are in production. They're not interesting experiments. They're running today. Our news team is using it around the world. We've got a translation tool that goes to and from 12 different languages. Take a guess which is the hardest language. Chinese, Japanese.
I was going to say Mandarin. No, what is it?
French.
French. Makes sense. They have their own vocabulary for everything.
Yeah, have you ever tried to order from a waiter in France? Even if you order in perfect French, and by the way, my grandparents are French, they will correct you. So the standard for getting French right is very high. We also have a transcription service. So, you can hold your iPhone out and grab what's happening live in 67 different languages, turns that into a first draft of a story.
And are these first-party tools you're building? Are you wrapping OpenAI? How does this work?
We have multiple tools that we're using. Again, some of that are in-house, some that are third-party. What we're finding is the orchestration of the tools that makes it work. Even in our translation, it's multiple different tools. Some models are good in Romance language, some are good in Chinese, Japanese. put them all to work on French. But the point being that it's really about being smart about what's working now and being very nimble.
So being in Montreal, I have to say how different French feels here than it does in Paris. My daughter's learning French, and she's been to Paris once and loved it, but she feels much more comfortable trying out her French here in Montreal. And bonjour, hello is just such a beautiful greeting. The social impacts of translation is an underappreciated aspect of generative AI, especially in the United States, where linguistic diversity tends to be treated as a problem to be solved rather than what it is, a cultural resource to be treasured and cultivated. For organizations that operate globally, or that, like most colleges and universities, serve a multilingual population, what will it mean to turn these little pocket computers that we all have into instant translation devices? We're only beginning to answer that question. If you haven't tried Wordly, that's the QR code that's on your table. It is amazing. And I was trying out versions of this technology 6 months ago, and it's nothing like that. But I encourage you before the conference is over to check that QR code and just see what's available to us. It is really astonishing. All right, the main reason I like that clip is it gives you a glimpse beyond chatbots. But as Bascobert said, what sits behind chatbots are not just questions about the future capabilities of these large AI models. It's about what it means to work in organizations that are using multiple AI tools, some of them small, purpose-built models, open source models, applications built on top of Claude or ChatGPT. It's also about effectively orchestrating the combination of those tools and the humans using them. Which brings us back to the speed of innovation and diffusion. When ChatGPT first came out, people would always say something like, "These are the early days of generative AI." We don't hear that as often these days, but I think it's just as true today. Think about how the filing cabinet helped tame piles and piles of paper that were accumulating in offices all across the world in the late 19th century. Think about the way that a networked PC running Excel helps tame budgets and allows for budget forecasting. Filing cabinets and digital spreadsheets are slow processes down. They are boring, but they were accomplished. They were invented. They were extended. They were diffused throughout society through the processes of innovation. And today, thanks to all that work, we barely notice them as a technology, that they're just how we work. I want to talk a little bit about what history might tell us about today's technology. And of course, history is about telling stories about the past. And when it comes to tech, we really like stories about heroes, like the one I just told about Paul Reuter. Stories about inventors and entrepreneurs who have insights and lead change. These are great stories. And I love that story about Paul Reuter. And I love the ones that Samer tells about Explorance. And you should follow him on social media if you don't. He really does a good job of presenting himself in relation to the company. One of the things that I really like about using filing cabinets as an example, though, is that it has no inventor. There's no entrepreneur associated with its development. There's no single genius who figured out that if you created a metal box that was lockable with file folders, that you could really organize paper in a different way. That was such a long-term development that no one really thought to document it. The story of the light bulb is quite different, though. Thomas Edison was very invested in his reputation as a genius. So you better believe that he made sure that historians had access to all his papers, and they saw all his receipts. But here's the thing. That story about Edison inventing the light bulb, that it just turned on one day in Edison's brain, and the next thing you know, we have electricity in our houses, that's not how it happened. There was a whole process of innovation and diffusion. And Edison got a lot wrong. His company was called Edison Electric, but he did not run it by the end of the 1890s. Historians call this story the War of the Currents to make it sound exciting. The war pitted Edison, who was convinced that direct current, DC, was the answer for electrification. And the opposite side of that war was fought by George Westinghouse, who made big bets on alternating current, or AC. Now you can tell this story as a fight between big personalities. Westinghouse and Edison were the Sam Altman and Elon Musk of the 1890s. But you can also tell it as a really boring story about patent lawsuits and corporate mergers. Here's my version, and the protagonists are not the inventors, not the entrepreneurs, and not the lawyers. The heroes are the innovators and diffusers, the people who worked for those early electric companies, the people who read about the light bulb, tinkered with it, came up with a better design. The local planners and residents who worked to bring electricity to their cities, their towns. The regulators and government officials who made it work on a national scale. The ones who figured out where to build the power plants and how to build customers. The people who solved all the little challenges of stringing electric wires across the continent, hooking them up to homes and businesses. They were the people who slowed things down by asking questions, proposing alternatives, listening to each other. To be sure, there were mistakes and problems. Electricity has this bad habit of starting fires. And it took some innovation to make sure that we could do all this safely. How did this happen? How did people work together in organizations to accomplish electrification? In one word, feedback. Organizations innovate products and services by understanding the relevant experiences of the people involved. You find out what works by gathering information. You use that information to guide decisions. I think historians 100 years from now might tell a story about generative AI that sounds kind of similar to the ones I've been telling about filing cabinets and electrification. Let me tell you one more story, and this is not quite history yet. There's a running joke among AI researchers that artificial intelligence is what you call a technology that doesn't work yet. Once it starts working, you have to come up with a new name. So let's talk about a recent technology, the one we call self-driving cars using AI, but now we're calling it autonomous vehicles. The hype around any form of AI is built on a sense that the future will be more exciting than the present. But as we all know, once the future arrives, it feels normal, maybe a little boring, kind of like real life. The first time you see a Waymo driving around San Francisco, what do? If you're like me last year when I visited San Francisco, you whip out your phone and you take a picture, a selfie, with the Waymo in the background, and you send it to your kids saying, "I've seen the future." The 10th time you see it, you barely notice it. That experience is coming for all of us. Waymo is adding Atlanta, Miami, and DC to its list of cities. Just this week, Uber announced plans to introduce robo-taxis in London in 2026. In this journey from the first autonomous vehicle on the streets back in 2009 to next year's boring ride to the airport in London or Atlanta are thousands and thousands of decisions. What distinguishes good decisions from bad? The effective use of feedback. One of the big problems that Waymo faced is how their vehicles behaved at scenes where first responders are working. What did Waymo do? They engaged with first responders and city planners. They gathered feedback so that Waymo could make informed decisions about innovating their product. Now, thanks to feedback, Waymo cars are better able to navigate scenes where emergency workers are present. Before the company deploys in a new city, it gathers information about emergency procedures, offers training programs to first responders. That feedback loop helps ensure the vehicles are well adapted to their new environment. Feedback loops are abstract ways to characterize how organizations incorporate information about their environments into decision making. This graphic emphasizes two elements that often get missed. We tend to over-focus on the decisions themselves. Are they right or wrong? But formulating the right question to be decided is important. And it's not just the decision itself that matters. You can make a good decision, but if it's not executed effectively, the decision itself doesn't really matter much. So formulating the right decision, the right question to be decided, and executing the decision matter. Now, when I introduced myself, I told you I worked on a lot of enterprise software implementation projects. And that means I sat through a lot of presentations from consultants with graphics like this one and insights like the one I just gave you. Formulate, execute. But let's be real for a minute. You could always abstract something to make it appear easy. But we all know that's not what it feels like when you're trying to make a decision. So I'm going to skip my last example because I think it just illustrates something that we've already talked about, which is...
For me, it was how do you get churn in a...
There we go. Something we've already talked about, which is the potential for AI to help us tighten feedback loops as a way of managing information overload. With all the swirl around us about AI, what it might do for us, what it might do to us, if we want to innovate in ways that make for success, we need to start treating AI like a normal, boring technology. So I've thrown a lot at you, and we're going to have some time for comments and questions here in just a minute. But all the stuff I've thrown at you was designed to help you think about AI in your organization. But here's a note I want to end on, and it starts with a story. Yeah, here we go. Sorry. Okay, here's the story. I was in the technology zone yesterday with Ian, the product marketing manager for Explorance, and he's been working with me on BlueX. He's been sort of holding my hand and answering my questions, and he's been great. The whole team has been great. It has been so much fun getting my hands on this tool, trying things out, screwing things up. I think Samar has it exactly right when he talks about that it feels familiar, which is not the same thing as easy. And as I got into it, and it was fairly easy to get into it, I got carried away. So I was like, hey, Ian, what if we did a survey in the middle of my keynote? I could use it to help me figure out how to really stick the landing. Maybe give the audience some options about how I could end, and they could give me feedback, and I could incorporate that feedback, and we'd make a decision. And Ian was game. He was like, okay, we'll set up a QR code. I went ahead and built a survey with him, and we were going to do it. And as we were talking about this, after we'd already kind of set it up, I said to him, you know, sometimes I really get into a cool new tool and I get distracted from what I'm trying to do. This is my experience with teaching, where technology sometimes distracts me from the educational goals I have. Sometimes I just end up using technology to make things too complicated. Ian smiled, he nodded, but I could kind of see something in his eyes. It was like, dude, that might be what you're doing here. So I thought about that look in his eyes, and 2 hours later, I went and found him again. I said, you know what, never mind. And I told him that as I was reflecting after that conversation, that it helped me really understand how I want to end the talk. So humans are tool creators. That's what we do. We look around our environment and we ask, what can we use to make our lives better? And so we invent things, and then we improve them. And these tools, they're amazing. Think about the Formula One racing cars, that image Samar showed, all the stuff we're going to hear about tomorrow from Mark Priestley. This is a fascinating and powerful technology. So are these large AI models. They're not boring, not at all. But you know what else is not boring? What cannot become boring? What we cannot let become boring? It's people. Our tools are amazing, but they're not what's most important. We should not be distracted from that. We're going to wrap up soon. And we're going to have microphones for all to take questions and comments, and we have a few more things to do here at the end. But here is what I want to leave you with. We're at a technology conference. We're talking about tools all day, trying out tools, having fun with tools. But technology is not the most important part of this experience. I don't come to Explorance World for the technology. I come for the people. The chance to say hi to people like Becky and Bob from Louisville. I first met them at my very first Explorance conference. They hosted it at Louisville. I come for the chance to chat with Samar, both Samars, and all my friends and colleagues at Explorance. The chance to meet new colleagues like Farah, whose name rhymes with Sarah, from Dubai, and Antonio from the Netherlands, who shares an interest in ecology with me that we're going to talk about tonight at the event. As we get ready to go out into this beautiful city on what is turning into a beautiful evening, as we prepare to socialize, share stories, talk with one another, I want to leave you with that thought. What's most important? As we make decisions, as consumers, as workers, as managers, as students, as teachers, as citizens, I hope, I urge us to keep in mind what's most important. Thank you. All right, we've got some time for questions, and I want to say something here, which is that, like I said, these issues are important, and we're not doing enough serious conversation about them, and serious conversation involves a disagreement. So if somebody has something that I said that seemed off or that they don't agree with, I really want to encourage you to speak up, because I want us to understand, to address the importance of the issue by having real dialogue and disagreement. All right, anybody have a comment, a question?
Anyone here? Over there. Oh, Shadi. Hold on. Shadi.
Thank you, Rob. That was very insightful. Quick question. I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. At what age do I start teaching them about AI?
Yeah, I have a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, so I'm right there with you asking these questions. And so, this goes back to the social context, right? Because it's not just AI, it's also these things, right? Because you can talk, when do you give your kid a cell phone? Like, these are questions because our new information technologies, all this digital, these digital gadgets and this powerful new technology is so accessible. I don't think it works simply to prohibit them and think that that's going to somehow protect them, right? So I think you have to start really early. One of my dreams is to write a children's book about AI. It's called There's a Mushroom in My Computer, and it involves an extended analogy about the way that generative AI is like a mushroom. I won't get into that. But all that's to say, I think, and this goes back to our work as educators, we have to start the educational processes early. We have to start helping kids and adults. I've got 2 elderly parents too. I need to help them develop some critical awareness and critical thinking. So I think the answer is as soon as they come out. All right, other question, comment?
Hi, I'm William from Minnesota. And I just wanted to thank you for sharing the electrification example that you shared. It got me thinking about the values that we bring to the decisions that we make. Like, are we going to hang the wires on a pole? Are we going to spend the time and money to bury them underground? And the idea of values when it comes to AI, I hear about it some, but not a lot. And I'd be curious about your perspectives on values when it comes to making decisions like these.
Yeah, well, I talked about one of them, right? And this is something you hear a lot in the discourse. Like, let's center humans in this discourse. Let's center humans when we're making these decisions. But I'm going to talk about another one next, which is we have to understand and acknowledge the uncertainty around this stuff. Like, there's some great analogies. I'm not sure mushroom is a really good one, but I know electricity is a really good analogy here because AI, generative AI, is a general purpose technology, and electricity is a general purpose technology. That analogy, though, only goes so far. AI is much more oriented towards information and culture. And so it's going to play out very differently. But when we start making these decisions and thinking about them, and this goes back to the importance of feedback and innovation and diffusion, we have to admit that we really don't know what's going to happen. We can make predictions, but the future genuinely is uncertain. And I think starting there with humans at the center and genuinely acknowledging uncertainty is the way to go.
I watched an interview maybe 2 weeks ago about how learning and teaching will become with the very fast intrusion of AI in the world of education. And it was going in all places, and there will be some changes that will happen in the way we learn, in the way the kids learn, in the way we evaluate the learning. And at the end, the lady who was interviewed said something very reconforting, that she said, in any ways, there will be something called school, where you will be sending your kids to a place called school, because otherwise our life will be completely changed. Think about it, if in the morning when you wake up, there isn't a place where you could send your kids for 6-8 hours in order for you to go to work. So yes, things are changing very, very fast, but we know the learning, the way kids will learn will be changing. We just have to figure out how to adapt again for this new reality.
I think that's right. And so I'll leave you with one thought about school and education, which is my own practice as a teacher. One of the things I'm going to do, I'm teaching a class on AI this fall, and I'm going to expect my students to use AI, but I'm going to ask them to do it mostly outside of class. In class, you know what we're going to be doing? We're going to be reading this book together, and we're going to be writing in notebooks. And we're going to be using the 19th century technology to help us think about a 21st century technology. And I think when I think about schools that are considering bans of cell phones in the schools, I am very supportive of the idea that we can create spaces that are not technology free, but free of the kinds of technologies that are causing anxieties and harm and worries, and instead focus on, again, what's the most important thing? If it's people, then let's put people together in schools. And focus on those human interactions.